In today's story, we explore the tragic downfall of a man who lost everything due to his own actions. Michael, a husband and father who thought he had the perfect life, but made devastating mistakes that cost him his family's love and respect. Evelyn, a devoted, elegant wife who gave her all to the marriage but refused to tolerate betrayal. Lucas and Emily. Michael and Evelyn's children struggle with their father's actions and the impact on their family. This story is a powerful reminder of the importance of honesty, respect, and accountability in relationships. It teaches us that no matter how much someone loves you, betrayal can destroy even the strongest bonds. If this story moves you, please share it with your friends and loved ones. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell for more real-life stories that inspire, teach, and reflect on the human experience. Michael sits alone in his dimly lit living room, staring at an old photograph of Evelyn, the woman who once lit up his world. His voice trembles as he begins to recount the day that changed both their lives forever. "I'll never forget the way she looked at me that evening," he begins, his voice tinged with nostalgia and regret. "Evelyn was unlike anyone I'd ever met, poised, intelligent, and breathtakingly beautiful. But there was a mystery about her, something that kept her guarded. It was a warm summer night when Michael proposed. They were at the small park near Evelyn's childhood home, under the soft glow of fairy lights strung across the trees. Evelyn, dressed in a simple white sundress, had smiled at him, but her eyes betrayed her hesitation. I told her she was the love of my life, the woman I wanted to build a future with. And then she said something I'll never forget. 'Michael, I don't believe in marriage.' The silence that followed her words was deafening. Michael had felt his heart drop. I thought she was just scared, or maybe being cautious. I laughed nervously and said, 'That's okay, Evelyn. You don't have to believe in it. I believe enough for the both of us.' Evelyn's lips curved into a faint smile, but her eyes held a warning Michael chose to ignore. Looking back, he says, his voice breaking, 'That was the moment I should have listened. But I didn't. I thought love could fix everything. I thought I could fix her.' As Michael stares into the camera, his eyes dark with regret, he leaves viewers hanging with a chilling question. If only I had understood what she meant that day, would things have been different? From the outside, Michael's life seemed like something out of a fairy tale. Sitting on the couch in his now empty living room, he reminisced about the early years of his marriage to Evelyn. "She was perfect," Michael said, his voice trembling with a mix of nostalgia and regret. Evelyn was everything he had ever dreamed of, beautiful, elegant, and so incredibly supportive. She wasn't just his wife. She was his partner in every sense. Michael remembered how effortlessly she seemed to balance it all: her thriving career, their home, and their relationship. She never raised her voice, never complained, and always made him feel like the center of her world. Their friends often gushed about their marriage. "You're so lucky," they would say to Michael at dinner parties. They envied him for having a wife who was not only stunning, but also kind and God-fearing. Evelyn was the kind of woman others admired from afar and wished they could be close to. But Michael's smile, as he spoke, faltered. Beneath the surface, something darker brewed. "I thought I had it all," he said, shaking his head. "I thought I was untouchable." The admiration from friends only fed Michael's ego. He began to take Evelyn's unwavering loyalty for granted, convincing himself that nothing could break their bond. Little did he know, the dream life he was so proud of was built on a fragile foundation, one he would shatter with his own hands. As Michael's voice trailed off, the weight of what he had lost hung in the air. The perfect life, the perfect wife, the perfect family, it had all slipped through his fingers, and it was entirely his fault. From the outside, Michael and Evelyn's marriage appeared flawless, a picture-perfect union admired by everyone around them. Evelyn, the poised and graceful wife, seemed like a dream come true. But behind the scenes, subtle shifts began to disrupt their seemingly unshakable foundation. Michael noticed it first in the little things. Evelyn's growing silence during dinner, the way her laughter didn't quite reach her eyes, and her occasional preference to retreat into her own thoughts rather than share them with him. "Is everything okay?" he would ask, but her responses were always the same, gentle, dismissive. "I'm fine," she'd say, with a small smile that didn't fully convince him. Yet Michael, unwilling to confront the possibility of trouble, pushed these signs to the back of his mind. What he didn't push aside were his temptations. Confident in Evelyn's loyalty and unconditional love, Michael allowed himself to stray. He rationalized his infidelity as harmless, a secret he could control, a thrill that wouldn't impact their perfect life. The thrill quickly turned into a pattern, a series of betrayals cloaked in secrecy. He convinced himself Evelyn would never find out. After all, she never pressed him, never questioned his late nights or his sudden need to travel for work. But Evelyn's quiet demeanor wasn't ignorance. It was observation. Every pause, every strained smile, every late-night excuse, she noticed it all. And while Michael felt untouchable, Evelyn was silently piecing together a puzzle she would one day use to unravel everything. Little did Michael know, the cracks he ignored were about to shatter their world. What happens when the perfect wife has had enough? It was a cold evening when Michael came home from work, the weight of the day still heavy on his shoulders. He entered their peaceful house, expecting another night of quiet comfort, the usual warmth of Evelyn greeting him. But tonight was different. The atmosphere fell off. Evelyn was sitting at the kitchen table, her back straight, her eyes hard and unreadable. The house, which had always been their sanctuary, now felt like a foreign place. In her hands, she held a stack of papers, papers that would shatter everything Michael thought he knew. He approached her, a nervous smile creeping across his face. "Hey, what's going on? You okay?" Evelyn didn't answer. She simply slid the papers across the table toward him. The divorce papers. Michael's heart dropped. His hands shook as he glanced down, the words on the page blurring before his eyes. "Wait, Evelyn, what is this?" His voice cracked. This can't be real. I never thought." Evelyn took a deep breath, her gaze steady but cold. "I'm done, Michael." She didn't raise her voice, but her words hit him like a freight train. "I have the evidence. Everything. All the times you lied, all the times you cheated, all the times I trusted you and you betrayed me." Michael's world spun as he tried to make sense of it. "Please, Evelyn, no. I'm sorry. I'll change, I swear. I'll do anything. Please don't." But Evelyn cut him off, her voice calm, unwavering. "I'm not doing this for you, Michael. I'm doing it for me, and for our children." Her eyes softened for a moment, but the resolve was clear. "I won't humiliate you, but I'm done. I'm leaving." The weight of her words crushed him. She wasn't angry. She wasn't yelling. She was simply done. Michael's knees buckled, and for a moment, he felt like the world was slipping out from beneath him. He collapsed to the floor, begging her, "Please don't leave me. Please. I'll fix it. I'll fix everything. Just give me another chance." But Evelyn didn't flinch. She stood up slowly, her face unreadable, and walked past him without a word. As she reached the door, she turned back one last time. "I deserve more, Michael. I deserve better." And with that, she was gone. The silence in the house was deafening, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on Michael. His heart pounded in his chest, and his mind screamed in disbelief. His world, his family, his life, all slipping away, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. This moment, this single night, had changed everything. The life he had once taken for granted was now a distant memory, and he was left alone with the crushing reality of his own mistakes. It's a cold morning, and the weight of the world feels heavier than ever. Michael sits in the living room, his hands trembling as he glances over the divorce papers that Evelyn had handed him just days earlier. The ink on the page still seems unreal, How could this be happening? How could everything crumble so quickly? The sound of the doorbell cuts through his thoughts. He opens the door, his heart racing, and there standing before him is Evelyn's lawyer, a tall man with a grim expression. Behind him, the moving truck is parked in the driveway, workers unloading the last of Evelyn's things. Michael, the lawyer begins, his voice calm but firm. Evelyn has made her decision. She wants to move on with her life. She's left you the house and the cars. She doesn't want anything from you. But she insists on a clean break. No further contact. Michael can't breathe. The words feel like a punch to the gut. A clean break? No further contact? He had thought that maybe, just maybe, he could salvage something. He had begged Evelyn to stay, pleaded with her to reconsider. But now, in front of him, stood the bitter reality. Everything he thought he had is slipping away. His eyes dart to the house, the home where they had raised their children, where laughter once filled every corner. Now it feels like a prison. The house no longer feels like a home. I don't understand, Michael mutters, barely able to find his voice. She just leaves me with nothing? The lawyer nods. She's done. I'll be in touch with the formalities. Please don't try to contact her. It's over. The finality in the lawyer's voice is like a shot to Michael's chest. The door closes with a hollow thud behind him. He stands frozen, unable to move, as the echo of that moment reverberates through his mind. His life is unraveling in front of him, piece by piece. The woman he loved, the children who once looked up to him, everything he had is now slipping through his fingers. As the lawyer walks away, Michael stares out at the empty driveway, the last remnants of his family gone. The weight of his mistakes crashes over him, and in the silence, he is left with nothing but his regret and a broken heart. The air in Michael's home had changed. The once warm, bustling place now felt cold and empty. After Evelyn left, things had never been the same, but what hurt Michael the most was the silence that followed from his children. His own flesh and blood. He had expected them to be angry, maybe even disappointed, but nothing could have prepared him for this. Every visit felt like a trial. Lucas, his son, had become distant, his eyes cold and unfeeling. Once full of life and joy, Lucas now seemed like a shadow of the boy Michael had known. He would sit on the couch, staring at his phone, hardly looking up when his father spoke. The conversations, when they happened, were clipped, forced, and lacking any warmth. Michael felt like a stranger in his own home. Emily, his daughter, was different, but only slightly. She would speak to him, but it was always with a quiet sadness in her eyes, as if every word she spoke was measured and weighed down by disappointment. "Why did you ruin everything, Dad?" she asked one day, her voice barely above a whisper. The words sliced through Michael like a knife. He tried to speak, to apologize, but no words seemed enough. Each visit left Michael feeling more isolated. He would watch them silently, wishing he could turn back time, to undo the betrayal, to mend the broken bonds. But deep down, he knew it was too late. Every passing day felt like a countdown. His family slipping further away, the distance between them growing too wide to cross. And then it hit him. The most chilling realization of all. His children didn't want to be there. They were only coming because Evelyn insisted, because she forced them to, out of obligation. This wasn't about love. This was duty. And even that seemed to be running thin. Michael was losing them. And this time, there was no one to beg. There was no second chance. The silence was deafening, and it was becoming the loudest reminder of his failure. Would he ever get them back? Or had he lost them forever? The clock was ticking. The air in the house felt colder than ever as Michael sat in the living room, staring at the floor. He hadn't seen his children in weeks, but Evelyn had insisted they come by for a visit. Michael could barely remember the last time he'd had a real conversation with Lucas or Emily. He could tell they were reluctant, but they came, nonetheless, probably out of obligation. As he sat there, his heart thumped in his chest, feeling like it was about to beat right out of him. His mind replayed every mistake, every betrayal, every moment that led him to this very point. He knew what had to be said, but the words stuck in his throat. He didn't know how to apologize, how to explain the unexplainable. Then he heard it, Lucas's voice, sharp and full of anger. "I never want to be like him. I can't even look at him anymore." Michael froze. His hands clenched involuntarily. Lucas, his son, the one who once admired him, was now speaking those words with so much contempt. Michael wanted to get up, to go over and tell him it wasn't true, that he was wrong. But his legs wouldn't move. His body betrayed him. Next, Emily's voice, softer but no less cutting. "I hope not all men are like him. I don't want my future to be ruined the way Mom's was." Each word hit Michael like a punch to the gut, the knife twisting deeper with every syllable. His own children, the ones he loved, the ones he tried to protect, were condemning him. The weight of their disappointment was unbearable. He sat there, paralyzed, his mouth dry, unable to respond. His mind raced. He couldn't even find a reason to argue. His actions had already spoken for him. He had betrayed their trust, shattered the family they once had. And now, as he sat silently in the corner, he realized the truth. He had lost them forever. The room seemed to close in on him, the walls pressing against him as if the house itself was reminding him of his failures. Every breath felt heavier than the last. He was sinking, slowly, surely, into a pit of regret that seemed impossible to climb out of. And then there was silence. Lucas and Emily had stopped talking. They had gone cold. No more eye contact, no more small talk. It was like they were already gone, even though they were still physically there. Michael's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. He wanted to scream, to beg them to understand, but the words, the apology, it was too late. He had ruined everything. Would he ever be able to fix what he'd broken? Or had the damage been done beyond repair? Michael sat in the sterile office, the scent of antiseptic mingling with the faint hum of fluorescent lights above. His therapist, Dr. Roberts, sat across from him, pen in hand, waiting for him to speak. But Michael was silent. His thoughts were a storm, swirling in a vicious cycle of guilt, regret, and despair. The life he had built with Evelyn, the love of his life, was now nothing but a distant memory. How had he fallen so far? "Michael, how are you feeling today?" Dr. Roberts asked gently, breaking the stillness. Michael's eyes were vacant, hollow, like a man who had already given up. "I don't know," he whispered, his voice strained. "I feel like I'm disappearing, like I've lost everything that mattered." Dr. Roberts leaned forward, her voice soothing yet probing. "You're here because you want to get better. You want to move forward, right?" Michael's chest tightened. The weight of his failures pressed down on him like a physical force. He wanted to scream, but no words would come. The therapy sessions, these brief moments of attempted healing, had become a hollow ritual. Each time he sat in that chair, he was reminded of how far he had fallen. He had tried everything, the apologies, the tears, the promises to change. But Evelyn was gone. His children barely acknowledged him, their visits more like a formality than an act of love. The walls were closing in. "I've lost too much," he muttered, the words choking him. "I've ruined everything. My marriage, my family. I don't even recognize the man in the mirror anymore." Dr. Roberts didn't respond right away, letting the silence stretch between them. But Michael couldn't shake the crushing sense of hopelessness that clung to him like a shadow. He had become a stranger to himself, a man consumed by guilt, slipping further into depression with each passing day. His weight had dropped, his health deteriorated. Friends had vanished. The world outside seemed distant, unreal. He hadn't seen Evelyn in months. He couldn't even bring himself to reach out to her lawyer anymore. Everything felt pointless. The cold grip of depression had tightened, and he feared it might swallow him whole. Suddenly, a thought pierced his mind. What if it was too late? What if redemption wasn't possible? His heart raced as he stared at Dr. Roberts, her eyes filled with pity, but no solution in sight. The dark thoughts had already crept in, whispering that it might be easier to just let go, to stop fighting. Michael sat there, utterly still, as if waiting for something, anything, to change. But deep down, he knew it was already too late. Michael sat in his cramped office, staring blankly at the stack of papers in front of him. The fluorescent lights above hummed, as if mocking his every thought. He had been late to work again, his mind still reeling from the conversations with his children, the icy reception they gave him, and the unspoken words that haunted him. The weight of his personal life was crushing him, and it was starting to show in every corner of his world. His phone buzzed. A notification. His manager, Greg, was calling him into the office. Michael's heart sank. He had known this moment was coming, but the reality of it was still a punch to the gut. He tried to shake off the unease, but his hands trembled as he stood up and walked down the hall. Inside Greg's office, the air felt thick. Greg, a man who had always seemed so confident and sharp, now looked at Michael with a mix of disappointment and regret. "Michael, I'm afraid we need to talk about your performance," Greg said, his voice cold and professional, as if he had already made up his mind. "Your numbers have been declining for months. The reports aren't getting done on time. Your communication has become inconsistent. This is not the work we expect from you." Michael's stomach turned. The words felt like a death sentence. The reality hit him hard. His professional life was crumbling just as fast as his personal life. He had neglected his responsibilities at work, just as he had neglected his family. Both his home and office had become a battlefield of his own making. Greg paused before delivering the final blow. "We've decided to move you to a lower position. You'll be handling more routine tasks from now on." The demotion was a public acknowledgement of his failures. Michael's mind screamed, but his body remained still, frozen in place. As he walked back to his desk, the realization hit him like a tidal wave. His life was unraveling, and now it was seeping into every area of his existence. The company that had once valued his contributions was now pushing him aside. His performance, once admired, was now barely tolerated. He had lost it all: his wife, his children's respect, and now his career. The worst part? There was no one to blame but himself. The weight of his mistakes crushed him, and with each passing second, he felt more like a ghost. The future seemed a dark, endless tunnel with no light in sight. The silence in the house was suffocating. Michael sat on the worn-out couch, staring at the floor, the weight of his past mistakes pressing heavily on him. He hadn't seen Evelyn in over a year, and the last time he saw his children, it was only because Evelyn had insisted. They visited out of obligation, their eyes filled with anger, disappointment, except for Emily. Emily, his daughter, was different. Though she spoke little, she would occasionally glance at him with a soft look in her eyes, a flicker of something he couldn't quite name. It was in those moments, when she wasn't avoiding his gaze like Lucas, that Michael saw the faintest glimpse of hope, a hope that he'd lost, that maybe, just maybe, he could fix things. That day, Emily walked into the living room, her usual quiet demeanor masking the storm brewing inside her. She stood in front of Michael, her arms crossed, looking down at him. "Dad," she said, her voice shaky, "why did you destroy our families?" Her question struck like a lightning bolt. Michael's heart raced, and he felt as if the ground beneath him was slipping away. He had no answer. The guilt, the shame, it all came crashing down in an instant. He wanted to speak, to explain, but the words felt hollow, like they could never be enough. Emily took a step closer, her eyes still filled with sorrow, but also a strange softness. "I don't understand, Dad. You were everything to us. And now I don't know what to believe anymore." Her words pierced through his soul. How could he have done this to them? To her? Yet, despite the pain in her voice, she didn't push him away. She stood there, her presence offering something he hadn't felt in so long: compassion, even if it was laced with confusion. Michael opened his mouth to speak, but his throat was dry. "I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily didn't say anything right away. Instead, she sat next to him, her gaze softening as she sighed. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Dad, but I want to understand. You're still my father, and I can't just shut you out completely." Michael felt a tear slip down his cheek, one he couldn't control. Emily's faint compassion was the only sliver of light in his dark, shattered world. It was the first real connection he had felt in months, and it was enough to make him believe, if only for a moment, that redemption wasn't entirely out of reach. He knew it would take more than words to fix what he had broken, but in that moment, Emily had given him something far more valuable: hope. And with that fragile hope, Michael was determined to do whatever it took to rebuild the trust he had lost. Michael sat in his empty house, his hands trembling as he stared at the phone in his lap. It had been over a year since Evelyn left him, but every moment felt like it was frozen in time. His heart raced as he contemplated making the call he'd been avoiding. The thought of speaking to her lawyer again filled him with dread. He had only communicated through that lawyer after Evelyn's departure, and every conversation left him feeling smaller, weaker. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It was late, but he had no intention of sleeping. His mind was too clouded with regret. The visits from Lucas and Emily were the worst part of his existence now. Every time they came, he saw the disgust in their eyes, the unspoken judgment hanging thick in the air. They barely spoke to him, barely acknowledged his presence. Only Emily still showed him small, fleeting moments of kindness, but even that felt like a distant memory. Michael wondered if it was time to ask Evelyn's lawyer for something he'd been too proud to admit before. Could she stop forcing the kids to visit? Could she just let him live in peace, away from the constant reminder of his failures? But what if this made him seem even more pathetic? A father who couldn't even handle his own children, begging for mercy from the one person who had every right to walk away from him. His finger hovered over the dial pad. What would the lawyer think of him? Would Evelyn see him as even more of a failure if he made such a request? Would it make him seem weak and desperate? He could already hear the lawyer's cold, formal voice on the other end, dismissing him without a second thought. The ringing began. His heart skipped a beat. What was he doing? Was he truly ready to face the consequences of his actions? As the phone continued to ring, the weight of his choices pressed down harder. He had no idea whether he could take back what had been lost, but this was the moment that would determine if he could face even the smallest chance of redemption. Finally, the call was answered. "Mr. Harrington," the lawyer said, his voice as stiff as ever. Michael opened his mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The suspense hung in the air as Michael stood frozen, realizing this was the pivotal moment. What would he say next? Would he go on, or would he admit to the deep, painful truth of his regrets? The house was eerily quiet. The laughter of his children, the warmth of Evelyn's presence gone. It felt like a cold, empty shell of what it once was. Michael stood in the living room, staring at the place where they used to sit together, where he had once felt so secure in his perfect life. His hands trembled as they ran along the edges of the furniture, trying to hold on to something, anything, that could remind him of what he had lost. As he walked through the house, his thoughts swirled with the ghost of his mistakes. He had cheated, over and over again. He had betrayed the one person who had stood by him through thick and thin, and now his world was falling apart. The house, the cars, even the family he had taken for granted, everything was gone. The reality hit him like a cold, hard slap. He sank into a chair, his face buried in his hands. How did it all go so wrong? The question echoed in his mind, but he already knew the answer. He had destroyed it himself. He couldn't deny the truth anymore. The consequences of his actions were irreversible. His children, his friends, his co-workers, all had turned their backs on him. Evelyn, she was gone, and it wasn't just because of the divorce. She was gone because he had failed her in every way that mattered. And now, she would never come back. In that silence, Michael felt his choices' weight crash on him. Was there any way back? Could he ever find redemption? The thought seemed impossible. But in the deepest pit of his regret, a flicker of something, a small, fragile ember, began to burn. Accountability. Perhaps he couldn't undo the past. Perhaps Evelyn would never forgive him. But maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to rebuild. One step at a time, by accepting the truth of what he had done and living with the consequences. Maybe by showing his children, one day, that there was dignity even in the brokenness. Maybe that could be his redemption. But as the evening shadows grew longer, Michael realized he was standing at the edge of a terrifying abyss. He didn't know how to start. He didn't know where the journey would lead. But one thing was certain, this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of a new, painful chapter. The suspense of the unknown hung thick in the air as Michael made a vow to himself. As faint and fragile as it was, he would find a way to live with accountability. He would fight for some semblance of dignity. But would he succeed? Only time will tell. As you've seen, Michael's life spiraled out of control because of his actions. Betrayal, regret, and the weight of lost relationships are powerful forces that can tear apart everything we hold dear. Michael's journey towards redemption is a harsh reminder of how fragile trust and love can be, and how much damage a single mistake can cause. So, we want to hear from you. What lesson did you learn from Michael's story? If you found yourself in a similar situation, what would you do? How would you rebuild trust and work towards redemption? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with your loved ones so they too can learn from Michael's mistakes. And remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that challenge, inspire, and help us grow. Stay tuned, and thank you for watching. So, what do you think? What lesson did you take away from Alex and Sophia's journey? Is it about balancing love and practicality, the importance of trust, or the power of communication in overcoming challenges? If you were in Alex's shoes, would you have insisted on the prenup, or would you have trusted your partner's commitment without hesitation? And Sophia, how would you handle a situation where you felt emotionally torn between love and the need for financial security? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment and share what you've learned and how you would approach a similar situation in your own life. And if you found this story insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, and loved ones. Let's spread the message about the importance of trust, mutual understanding, and respect in relationships. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge and inspire, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in our next story.